Guys, what's up? Welcome to the Hot Tub Club where inspiration bubbles up. I'm your host, Samara Renee, and today is another wonderful podcast with myself. I'm going to talk about what's going on in the news this week, which is big news. Pope Francis died. I want to talk about my faith story and how Pope Francis is part of that faith story. There are so many people who have been touched by the work that he has done. I believe it was 12 years that he was the Pope. So, not just Catholics, but people from all over the world. This episode is dedicated to the Holy Father who passed away a few days ago. I actually was thinking of having one of my good friends, Junior. I've known him forever. We are huge Mariah Carey fans. We actually met at a concert years ago and we've been friends ever since. I thought about having him on the show because number one, I just love him. Number two is that he also has a great love for Pope Francis and his unique story with his spirituality and how that ties into him getting reconnected with the Catholic Church, but also some of the challenges that some people do have in different situations that the church does not approve of. I wanted to talk about that and how he's able to maintain his faith, even though there's elements to our faith that are not aligned with what he has. So I hope to have him on in the future because I think it would be a really interesting conversation to have with him just to see how he has developed as a person and how happy he is in his life and how successful he is. He's one of the sweetest people in the world. You guys will love it. So I'm going to keep working on that and having him on the podcast. But today I did want to talk about my faith journey. I don't really talk a lot about my faith a whole lot on my YouTube channel. If you guys have not followed me yet, please subscribe at the Samara Renee and make sure you guys like as well. I used to have a blog that I used to write about my faith all the time, and I'm forgetting what I even named it. It might have still been Samara Renee. I don't know. I have no idea. I forgot. I talked about my spiritual journey and how I ended up coming back to the Catholic faith in my early 20s. And I basically just was called back home. And I love telling my story. I love sharing it because it's undeniable to me that God was calling me back to the church. I've been looking for meaning in my life, and I always had a relationship with Jesus, but I wasn't attending Mass, and I convinced myself that I really didn't need to go to Mass. I put a lot of other excuses with things that were happening in a church that I did not approve of, and that about it. What was really truly important, which is having that deep relationship and faith in God, but also with the church. Points in my life that things kept popping up with like my spirituality, why things happened, why am I still here? Why was that allowed to happen? If you have not subscribed to this podcast, that you do so right now, because every week we are going to have amazing guests and have true, authentic conversations about life and to get real. And I love talking to people and all the different journeys that they have been on. This is just part of my journey. I don't expect anyone to have like a conversion based off of my story. I'm just going to keep it real. And the conversations that I have had with me and the big JC, it's amazing that it came back around to God. And it's still a developing conversation that we have. I'm not saying that I am the best Catholic Christian. I'm not saying that I have the best relationship. I actually had two, probably more than 2 years, that I really was struggling spiritually. I didn't receive communion for over 2 years. I did not feel right that I felt so much anger and resentment about things that were going on. I'm not even worthy of this. I'm not going to even present myself up to receive communion. Well, I'll start from the beginning, of me. My birth stories is kind of crazy. I actually had the opportunity to talk to my mom about my birth story several years ago. And I think it was around my birthday. And I finally was like, Mom, can I know the bits and pieces about my birth story and what happened? But I don't have it from you, like breaking it down minute by minute, what was going on, how were you feeling? And I just wanted to ask her. And when I go on the phone with my mom, it's never for like 15 minutes. It's usually about 3 hours. If I'm going to have a conversation with my mom, I have to make sure that it either prepared to sit down and not have anything else on my schedule for a couple of hours, or I will be doing a long distance drive. For instance, I was coming back from Death Valley. I ended up calling both my parents and having long conversations with them because that moment presented itself and it was perfect. When I was having this conversation with my mom, and I knew growing up that I almost died when I was born. And my mom, she kind of explained my name. So a lot of people say my name incorrectly. And I actually had, I'm not going to say a fight, but I will say it was, I don't know, I think it was like mostly Lang, but I did get into it with some people, a part of our relative clip group, about the pronunciation of my name because they felt like they were right in their pronunciation. And, they went to the lengths of like, oh, I went online and I found it. And I was like, no, that is not where my name is derived from. I said, this is where my name came from. This is what it's about. Oh, my name is pronounced Samara. Like, whenever anybody reads the story about the Samaritan, they talk about the Good Samaritan, they always say Samaritan. You never hear them say Samaritan. You never hear them say Samaritan. No, it's Samaritan. So that's where my name really originates from. It's Arabic, okay? So I had a whole moment about that because I'm like, how are you going to tell me how I pronounce my name? Seriously? That was a major issue for me. So, anyways, we started talking about the whole birth story, and my mom, she gives colorful commentary to her stories and how she was getting prepared. And I was to be induced. She had been through all of this 3 times already with my older sisters. So she was just expecting this to be a normal birth. And everything was going fine up until the point when I came out. So evidently, when I was born, I stopped breathing. I don't believe they ever figured out why. I don't know. Maybe I was just under some distress. I got delivered and my mom thought everything was good. And next thing you know, that she said, I think she said they did a code blue on me. There was a whole team of doctors that came running in and they were trying to revive me, and which I didn't know. All these years I didn't realize, but she said they basically took me away and they were doing all these tests on me and making sure that I was breathing properly on my own. And she said there was hours that she did not know if it was yay or nay, if I was still with us or if I died. She said she didn't know. That just blew my mind. So basically, you're just sitting there waiting to find out if your child that you just had was dead or alive, and nobody was really communicating with you with what was going on. How did you deal with it? And she's like, I just dealt. She goes, but it was really scary. That was from her perspective. I'm sure my siblings are going to have another perspective of how that birth story went down, but that actually came from my mother's lips of what happened. So basically, she didn't know what happened to me. And several hours later, I came back and I was back in my mom's arms, and it was history. My name picked out for me before I was even born. So we had to do this whole project when we were kids, and they asked your name and why did your parents name you that? And so I had to ask my mom that when I was little. I must have been like in first or second grade or something. And she was like, oh, I found it in Baby Book and I liked the meaning and I knew you were going to be my last kid and I wanted to have a really special name. They thought I was actually a boy at some time. I don't know why they thought I was going to be a boy here, but evidently I wasn't a boy and they found I was a girl. So she picks Samara, and my name means guarded by God. That's what my name means. And the reason why she chose that name is because she knew she was not going to have any more children, and she just wanted to have extra protection around her last kid. Super special, right? Wow. How did you know it? Thank God I named you that because as soon as you came out, there was an issue with you. Yeah, it's so crazy, right? How that all worked out. So that was my name, Samara. From that point on, throughout my life, I wonder why, like, I didn't die. I hear these stories of people having babies and they seem fine and they die. I asked my mom, did you ever find out like, why I stopped breathing? And she goes, no, they didn't really know why. You just stopped breathing when you came out. Why was I allowed to continue on and to stay here on earth? What is my purpose? I thought a lot about that as I was growing up. Then I had another situation, which I could go in great detail about me getting hit by a car when I was 15, but I think that needs to be a whole podcast episode by itself because my reasoning at 15 years old and the things that I was concerned about after being hit by a car versus I really have been concerned about was so 15 and so mature. Got hit by a car crossing the street when I was 15 years old, and I was in a crosswalk. I did everything right, and I still got hit. So when I got hit by a car, the guy that hit me, I think he was listening to like Nine Inch Nails. So his music was so loud in his car, and I just remember trying to cross the street. And during that time of day, which is after school, which was after 3 o'clock, the sun shines right in your eyes at the intersection where I cross. And me and my best friend Mary, who was on a show last week, every time we crossed that street, we would always joke and say, wouldn't it be crazy if we both got hit by a car and we're both in the hospital? There were so many near misses at this intersection. So, of course, the one day that she doesn't come to school and she stayed home sick, I got hit by a car. I vividly remember every single thing that happened and literally seeing the car coming towards me and saying, oh my God, I can't believe this guy's going to hit me. Getting tossed up, hit on my left side, rolled over the windshield. I went on top of his roof. I busted his window. There's a huge dent on his roof. And I ended up rolling off and falling into the street. He hit me so hard that my shoes got knocked off. My backpack that was on my back got knocked down. I don't know. It might have been a couple of feet down the road or whatnot. And the crazy thing, and I didn't think about this until my fees, which is so crazy that did not think about this. But this is a heavily trafficked street, and nobody, all the people who saw this accident happen stopped to help me and to ask if I was okay or stay with me until the cops came. Nobody. And I didn't really clue into that until I got older. And I was just like, that's messed up that I'm a teenager, just got hit by a car. I'm physically injured. I'm bleeding out of my hands and my face. Okay. I'm bleeding all over the place. And no one said, I'm going to stop and sit with this girl until help comes. Nobody did that. So I had no other choice. And of course, when you are in crisis mode, the first thing I think about, because I was so close to home, I was literally less than a 5 minute walk from my house, that I I need to get a hold of my mom. And this is the time, boys and girls, if anyone who is younger than a millennial, we had cell phones, but not like the way we have it now, where everybody has one. My parents had one, but they never had their cell phones on. And then I didn't have a cell phone where I could call. So my first instinct, because we were so close, was my mom's a nurse. I'm going to go home based off of the condition I was in. And literally, my head got smashed into the windshield. My best decision making at that time was to get in the car with the guy who just hit me, which is not super smart. I'm sure everyone's like, oh my God, screaming at me, oh my God, why did you do that? You're so dumb. You would probably not be having the greatest decision making if your head just hit someone's windshield. Just saying. My mom's home every day after school. My whole life, she's been home every single day after school. I said, my mom's home, she'll know what to do. So we got into the car. Remember, his windshield's broken. The top of his car is messed up. His front hood's all jacked up. That's my imprint, my body flying over. We get to the house. My, fight or flight is in overdrive by that time. I'm shaking. I get out of the car and of course, he's a stranger. I probably should never got in a car, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I told him to wait outside the door because I was going to go get my mom and my mom would know what to do. So I'm shaking, trying to get in the house. I'm still bleeding, by the way. And I start walking through the house because my mom would either be in two places. She would probably be in her room if she worked the night before, because my mom was a nurse and she worked nights, or she would be in the living room at that time. So I went in the living room, didn't see anybody. The house was quiet. So, okay, I'm going to go walk in the back and go see if mom's awake. I walked down the hallway. Nobody was there. I was, Mom, I need you, Mom. Nobody was home. So the thing that happened was, which I didn't know at the time, was my parents were celebrating their anniversary. I want to say it was maybe their 25th anniversary at the time, maybe. My mom went to go pick up the cake and was going to come right back home. And that was the time I was normally coming home at that time. So she was gone. So I'm in a house freaking out. Okay, what do we do in emergency? Okay, I'm going to call dad. And knowing my dad never had a cell phone on and he had a pager. Okay, I'm going to page my dad. I'm going to page 911. So page my dad a couple of times. My dad was a bus driver in LA. I knew that even if he got the message, he couldn't pull over and call until he had a rest break. Okay, I'm going to call my aunt who lives in Pasadena. Of course, my aunt wasn't home. Called my oldest sister at work and she worked at a Toyota dealership. Okay, called her job and then I called the main line and they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to go track her down. And they said, oh, she actually just went on a lunch break. Do you want to leave a message? And I said, yes, tell her it's an emergency. Her sister got in an accident and she needs to come home. Who else in the world can I call? I was freaking out. I started getting teary. I didn't know what to do. Then the guy who hit me is right outside my door. I left it crack. He was like, I just want to make sure you're okay. Are you okay? I want to make sure that you don't start if I passed out somewhere. Just hold on a second. I said, I'm trying to call my family. I don't know where anybody is. Okay, who else can I call? And then I remembered my best friend didn't come to school. And her mom was a stay at home mom. She was home every single day. I'm going to call Mary. She picked up the phone and she was like, hello. And I was, hey, Mary, I need your help. And she goes, what's going on? And I got hit by a car on the way home from school. And she started laughing. She was like, are you kidding? And I said, Mary, no, I'm not kidding. My mom's not home. I don't know what to do. And next thing I know, I just hear her screaming, and so I literally hear her on the phone. Next thing I know, her mom is running out and she always had these little like shoes. She came running across the lawn. And I really didn't think about this until again in my piece of like her mom stopped everything she was doing and she came flying across that street with her portable phone and was like to like the guy that hit me, you stop right there, don't you go anywhere. She's calling the cops as she's like running across the lawn. Evidently people who witnessed the accident called the cops. They didn't stop, but they called the cops at least. The cops were actually looking for me and looking for this guy that hit me and they couldn't find us because of course I went home. So after all of that, the cops come, of course, because they finally locate it and they're like, this is where she's at. This is what happened. So then this, of course, our town, there wasn't a whole lot going on. There wasn't like a whole ton of activity or crime at that time. So of course, all of these cops come. So we had like 3 or 4 cops that came flying up. We had a motorcycle cop that came up. And so the house was just flooded with all these cops. And they take him aside and they start questioning him, like, what happened, blah, blah, blah. So then by that time, when the cops came, then my mom pulled up in her van. And for her, this is the sad part. My mom, she had a very traumatic experience when her dad died, and her dad died when she was 9 years old. So she came home to a similar experience at 9. In my head, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to scare mom and she's going to freak out. So when my mom pulled up, she just put the car in park and jumped out and was like, what's wrong? What happened? What's wrong? And I was just like, I'm fine, but I said, I'm fine, but I got hit by a car on the way home from school. And then that's when I just started crying. And of course, because I finally can let my guard down, I was safe, my mom was there, and she would know what to do. After that, that's when all the pain hit. Is once my mom came and basically took over the situation, and the start pain started hitting, and then of course the ambulance came. They're like, "Do you want to transport or do you want to take her to the ER?" And so my mom said, no, I'll just take her right now. So we finished up with what they needed with the cops, and she ended up driving me to Kaiser, walking into the ER. And by that time, it was probably like an hour after the accident, maybe an hour and a half. And I come walking into the ER and I'm limping by that time. For some reason or another, at the time, my hips weren't hurting because I actually got hit right in my left hip and my lower legs. That didn't hurt, but my ankles hurt really bad. It was the weirdest thing. I didn't know why my ankles were hurting. And so I was limping my way in, and my mom's like, do you want me to get a wheelchair? And of course, I was like, no, no, I'm fine. I'm like, just leave it for the people who really need it. So I'm limping into the ER. I don't even remember how long it took. I don't feel like it was a long time before I was seen and I had to take x-rays. The doctor, I just remember the doctor was cute. That's all I remember. I don't remember what he looked like, but I was like, ooh, he's young and he's cute, right? I get looked over and he was like, "Oh, so tell me what happened." "Oh, I got hit by a car on the way home from school." He was like, "Oh, yeah? What time was that? Did that just happen?" And I was like, "No, I think it was like 3 o'clock." And by that time, it was like 4:30, 4:45. He was like, "Oh, wow. Did you just walk in or what?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, like, "I just walked in." And he's like, "You're really lucky, fortunate, because a lot of people who get hit by a car, even at low speed, like they need to be hospitalized." I felt pretty lucky to be able to just walk in. I almost broke my eye socket, but it was like just heavily bruised. I had like a black eye for a week or two, some swelling. I sliced open my hand. Luckily, I didn't need stitches on that. And most of the bleeding was from like my hand and from my eye. I had some scrapes on my hands and my legs and stuff. But other than that, like that was pretty much it. The doctor swore up and down that I did not have a concussion, but he said he couldn't be 100% sure. So he just said, try to keep me up for a couple of hours and just keep an eye on me. Till this day, when people ask me about that accident, I remember everything that happened that day. I had dinner and afterwards. I just tried to sit up for a while. And then I know my sister came home. I just was out of it. I'm really tired. I really want to go to sleep. I said, "Can I just go lay down?" And so my mom was like, "Okay, I think you're going to be okay, but I'll check in on you." So I just remember throughout the night, like my sister came home. She came home from practice and she was checking on me. And it was just crazy, but I don't remember a whole lot of what happened after that week. So I know for sure, like the day after, it was the first Drill Team sleepover that we had. And it was the first one my mom was going to let me and my sister go to because every time we had sleepover, she always said no. But she actually agreed to let us do it. I am not missing this freaking sleepover. The next day, after getting hit by a car, I ended up going to the sleepover. My mom told me, "If you are in pain at any point in the night, it doesn't matter what time it is, call me and I will come get you." So, of course, I was like, "I'm going to tough it out. I'm going to go." But really, I don't remember most of what happened because I was like so tired and I was in so much pain. And all of my drill team members that were there, they really did not believe I got hit by a car until they saw me. And they're like, "Oh, damn, like you really did." I hung in there and I spent the night. I don't remember half of what we did. I think at like 5 in the morning, I ended up calling my mom. I think my mom gave me her cell phone and she said, "Call the house." And I was just in so much pain. And I said, "Mom, I'm really hurting. Can you please come get me?" And so she was like, "Okay, that's fine." There's like little points in a week that I remember, but there's a lot of points in a week that I don't remember. So I remember going back to school. My mom very rarely dropped us off at school. Okay. But she dropped me off at school on Monday. I don't remember what happened on that Sunday. Well, I do know what happened on that Sunday. Yeah, I do remember. So the guy that hit me actually ended up coming. I believe he came on Sunday and he came with an apology note, a box of mixed nuts, this huge white gorilla. It was humongous. And he came really early in the morning. He woke everybody up on a weekend. And I got up and he wanted to apologize to my parents and he wanted to apologize to me. My mom asked, "Do I want to talk to him?" And I really wanted to say no. And she's like, "He really wants to apologize for hitting you. Can you just poke your head out and listen to him?" And I said, "Fine." So I drug myself out of my bed and then he apologized and he just shoved all this stuff in my hands and said, "I'm so sorry." "That's okay. It's an accident. Whatever. Fine." That gorilla had like bad juju. I stayed away from it. Eventually, I got rid of it. I remember that, and I remember going to school on that Monday because there was a cute guy in my science class, and I was afraid to see him because he actually witnessed the accident. He was walking up the street when I got hit, and he saw what happened. And I remember getting up, and my thought in my head as a 15-year-old girl was, "Oh my God, I hope he wasn't coming up the street. I hope he's not coming up the street." And of course, with my luck, he did come up the street. He saw everything. He was like, he didn't know what to do. He was just like, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" Just keep walking home. On Monday, when I came in the class, he was like, "Are you okay?" My response, "I'm alive. It's fine." That's probably one of my most embarrassing moments, being hit by a car in front of your crush. Long story short, there's a whole little bit of time, couple of weeks at that time that I don't remember. I don't know if I didn't have a concussion. I'm not buying that. But anyways, long story short. But I did end up going to drill team practice on that Monday, which is people think that's crazy that I did that back in the day. Was that you went to drill team practice, and if you didn't go to drill team practice, you lost your spot on the team. So I was like, no, the alternate on one of the teams, and so I wanted to keep my spot. Why did God save me from that? There were key points in time that I was questioning things, and points where my spirituality was brought back to God. And one of those other times is 9/11, and I could try to figure out like how such a horrible event could happen was by going to church. That was my first time going to church on my own. We went to church growing up with my mom, and I got baptized. I was 7 when I got baptized. And, we had First Holy Communion and all that great stuff. My mom got really busy after we stopped going to church on a regular basis. I didn't have a consistent going to church every Sunday after we moved lots of time from 9 years old all the way up until my mid 20s. And where we didn't have church, but I prayed every single night. Like I never wanted to disappoint God. That was like something that was always within me. And when we were learning about like the First Holy Communion, and we used to play Mass at home, we had like this little Bible. It's just so funny. But that's what kids do. They just reenact what they learn, and that's how we process. So came and I remember going to church, and I went to church several times during that the first couple of weeks trying to find a sense of peace. It was a really awful time. I'll just say that. And it was very confusing. I didn't understand so many innocent people could die at the hands of a group of individuals that were, why are people mean in the world? There was another point in time in my early 20s where one of my childhood friends was murdered, unfortunately. And finding out that your childhood friends died on the news, which is like the worst way to find out. I always tell people this, but this is just something that's just so ingrained. But going to her viewing at the mortuary and seeing her two daughters, 2-year old and 4-year old, in the casket with their mom. And they were like, why is mommy not waking up? Everybody broke down. Just horrible. That really shook me up for a long time. Early 20s, I was still trying to find my way. I learned about every other religion with for Catholics. I was hearing stuff that was going on with the sex abuse within the church and negative views on the church based off of everything that I was hearing. I looked at every other religion to just not have to deal with what was going on with the Catholics. Meeting my friend Janet, and she is a very devout Catholic, and I ended up working in her classroom, and we had some crazy moments. We had a crazy accident. I ended up making a lifelong friend, and we had this crazy accident where we had all of our preschoolers. I was at a teacher's aide in a preschool, and all these kids sitting underneath this window, and there was a landscaping crew that was chopping down trees right outside of our window. Looking over at my Janet, and she's trying to read a story and teach, and I'm like, didn't they know this was a school? Like, couldn't they pick any other time of day to cut these freaking trees down? A few seconds later, the landscaper starts to start up his chainsaw, and he evidently got too crazy with it, and he ended up tossing his freaking chainsaw into the window, shattered all across the floor, all over our kids. And by some miracle of God, none of the kids got hurt. None of the kids had a speck of glass on them. It was crazy. So that's how we all started talking about God, was based off of that incident. And so that's when she started sharing about her faith. She didn't press it on me. I quietly started going to a church called St. Mark's. And I didn't go to mass. I had this thing about going to mass, but I'm going to go pray. That's fine, but I'm not going to go to mass. So I did that for a full summer. Eventually, I came to the decision that I was going to go back to the church. I met Janet, and I was just like, man, I keep meeting all these damn Catholics. So I would pray, and didn't tell anybody. I was considering coming back to the faith. God, if you really want me to come back to church, then you're going to have to make this really easy on me. So I have no excuse. St. Mark's is too far from where I lived. It's too easy for me to make an excuse to not come to church. So I have to find a church that's at least less than 5 minutes from my house. So I have no excuse not to go to church. Janet kept sharing about her faith and different saints. I started sharing little bits of like questions that I had. I decided that I was going to take the streets home from there, which I hadn't done before. I want to see if I can make it home by street. I ended up coming home a different way. I was just trying to like follow the map. This is how I get back home. Just moved to the town that I live here in San Diego. Just trying to figure out my way around. Rooster, I have nothing but time, and then I'm gonna go home. Happened to see a church being built, and I was just like, "Oh, that looks like a church." You know, with my luck, that's probably a Lutheran church or something, and which nothing wrong with that. But my specific ask was Catholic Church is where I'm supposed to be. You need to make it blatantly clear and super easy for me to have no excuse not to go. Up the street and I saw this church construction happening, and then I see St. Margaret's. And then I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's going to say St. Margaret's Lutheran Church or something like that. A little piece of it said Catholic as I was just driving by it. And then, so of course, I immediately was like, I'm going to time this to see how long it takes me to get home from here. So I timed it from the time of me crossing the church until I pulled up into the front of the house. And it is exactly 5 minutes from my house to church by car. And so when I got home, I like, of course, called Janet. I was like, oh my God, Janet, you'll never guess what happened. This is a sign. I was shaking because that's what I asked for. And it's like right here. I didn't know there was a church nearby. I didn't realize that there was a church right down the street from my house. There's another Catholic church that's like maybe 7 or 8 minutes away. I didn't have any idea. So I was shaken up. God made it blatant clear. Hey, church is right here. You have no excuse. You asked for 5 minutes. Here it is. Even with that, I had a really clear answer. And I was like, well, but maybe he didn't really mean that. I was just trying to make an excuse. Kept talking to Janet about it, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna see what time they have church, and I'm eventually gonna come. I think it took me 3 weeks before I got the courage to go to church. I ended up going to night mass because I was like, oh, that's perfect for my lifestyle, and I don't have to wake up early in the morning. Little did I know that this evening mass was Latin mass, which was comical because I ended up coming back to mass. That's my first mass. I remember exactly what I wore. I wore like a cream sweater and jeans. That was my first day back to church. Went to Latin mass in this beautiful big church. And I was really nervous to talk to the priest afterwards, but I somehow got the courage and I walked up to him and I introduced myself and said, I'm new to the church. I've been thinking about coming back to the Catholic Church. He started asking me questions. And so he basically was like, you know, before you take communion, you need to go back to church. You need to go back and have a confession. At that time, because I was in my early 20s, I was resistant to that because I was okay. This little Irish man's trying to tell me how to live my life, and I don't like that. I got pissed off for a while. It took me a couple days and he encouraged me. He's like, I want you to come to confession. And it goes, and I need you to start coming to mass every Sunday. And I want you to check in with me after every mass. Well, forget that little Irish man. I'm not coming back. And as the week went on, it kind of bothered me. Okay, well, you know what? Just to spite this little Irish man, I'm going to come to church and I'm going to make myself known. So I ended up coming back. How I came back to the church, it was a freak experience. All of these experiences brought me back. I decided to come back. I started going to RCIA. Now they call it OCIA. It was a couple of months of weekly meeting to learn about your faith. That was a hard commitment for me to keep. I was like in a brand new relationship and it was like going well. And even though it was like a week was, oh, I'm not going to have time with my boyfriend. It was an hour, but I thought it was like end of the world. That was a huge sacrifice. I only missed maybe one or two, maybe one. People that would come and share about their lives and how they came to the faith, and they gave us a lot of reading materials. I wonder if I still have all that stuff from when I went through RCA and for confirmation. It's like I felt like it was 6 months, but maybe it wasn't. But you're getting ready to come into church at Easter. And how special that was. And the day that I got confirmed, I had doubts if I was ready, if I knew enough. Was this really what God wanted me to do? It was just so crazy. Janet and Tom, they were both my sponsors. Feeling really connected to our Blessed Mother Mary. And I felt a connection with my grandmother on my mom's side. I just felt like she was with me during that time. And am I doing this for the right reason? Am I doing it for me? How am I supposed to be going into confirmation that Easter Vigil? I had no idea what was happening. Barely remember anything from that because I was so nervous waiting to go through confirmation. I didn't know what was going to happen. They explained what was going to happen, but you don't really know what's going to happen. You're going to put this oil on your head and then what? What's going to happen? I'm scared. Like, am I going to be speaking in tongues? I prayed. I need some type of confirmation. They put this oil called Sacred Chrism, and it's like the most beautiful smelling oil that the priest, Father Kavanaugh, he helped to change my life and shape my spirituality. And he said, be sealed with the Holy Spirit. And at the time, he was actually like doing the sign of the cross on your head, and then he would like smack you in the head like this, and then like hold it. You're going to be sealed, right? Doing that. And then he says, peace be with you. And I was praying, God, if I'm supposed to be here, you need to show up right now. I felt this rush. Felt like, yes. It was a confirmation that was just short and sweet, but yes, this is what you're supposed to do. Yes. And after that point, I was just on this high of love for church and God and learning as much as I could about the Catholic faith and learning about all the saints. The first saint I learned about was Saint Therese of Lisieux, and priest Father Kavanaugh, he introduced me to her. This is the one that really shook me up. Saint Padre Pio. Tell everybody about him. If you really want to believe, if you really want to be shaken up and see if God is real, learn about Padre Pio. Look him up, read all the stuff that you can about him. He lived up until the 1960s. There's actually video of him and footage. There are people who are still alive who knew him. There's documentation. They had people from outside the church and scientists who tested him. He had something called the stigmata, which is the wounds of Christ. And when I learned about Padre Pio, that shook me up. I was like, this is real. There was no way this guy could have faked this. Why would somebody want to go through all of that and some of the humiliations that he had to go through? So if you haven't heard about Padre Pio, please look him up, read about him. He is a very powerful saint, especially for healing. And every time we have some type of like, especially my nieces, and it's anything with their health, I always say, I tell my sister, I said, tell so and so to pray to Padre Pio. Just trust me, just pray to Padre Pio. He'll help you. And I always go to him. I pray to him for everything. He's pretty amazing. I'm getting to know Saint Anthony a little bit better. Not as much. Another saint that I really love, and all of these we have pictures of them at church. I really fell in love with learning about the saints, learning about the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe that they have in Mexico, and the scientific research that's been done on the Talma. If you have not seen documentaries about that, and actually how many people have done research on that Talma and the significance and the meaning behind stars in the background or the constellation on that exact day is crazy. If you're curious and you want to learn a little bit about what us Catholics do, or any Christian does, and you are questioning your faith or if faith is real, or look into these things, Our Lady of Guadalupe, like the Talma, and to learn about that, and Saint Padre Pio. Well, I have so many saints I could talk about. I get so pumped up about sharing my crush of well, he's not a saint yet, but he's a blessed, and hopefully very soon, Blessed uh, Pier Giorgio Frassati. If you want to talk about a saint that is a hot, hunky man of a saint, look him up. When I learned about him, he's a cool guy, number one, very spiritual, fought for what he believed in, but he had this love story with a girl that he loved and who was one of his friends. Oh, it's like reading about their lives, and he died young, and he spent a long time helping the poor, and I think he came from an affluent family, and he had a group of friends who were into their faith, and he was very outdoorsy and just very a man's man, and would go on these hikes. So I connected with him, Pier Giorgio Fossati, another Italian, and he's good looking. That may not be like a thing to be looking for in a saint, but he's another one that I'm really looking forward to where his sainthood. Why am I talking about all of this and talking about all this crazy stuff that happened, and how does this tie in to Pope Francis and everything? So after John Paul II died, he was the only pope I knew, and I didn't even know him that well. I started learning about him as our pope, and then he ended up dying around that time after I got confirmed. I started to learn everything I could about his life and the things that he went through, losing his mom at a young age. He also lost a sibling, and going through the whole time with the Nazi, able to stay positive and not let that get him down and continue to practice his faith, even though if he would have been caught, he would have been killed for that. And he also is another person who was around young people. He loved drama and theater, and he really had a great connection with the youth and encouraging young people to really dive into their relationship with Jesus. And what I learned about him, but then after Pope John Paul II died, and I was really into the whole conclave and the funeral. I don't really cry for people that much. You have to be really close to me. I wept during his funeral because it was so beautiful. The conclave, and then Pope Francis. When Pope Francis came, that was a huge deal. We had the loop on for the news. So when the smoke came, I was, oh my God, the smoke! We were all freaking out. And so it was amazing and fun time, and especially with Pope Francis. He was a different vibe. He came from South America, the first Pope of the Americas. He was named Francis, and Francis of Assisi. And that was, really special. He was a Jesuit. And was he perfect? No. But a lot of things that I really appreciated about him was his openness to others, of course, the poor, the marginalized. He really went to the people, like went to the flock, he went to the people who were suffering. I really loved that he opened up the heart. They asked a question of him about gay people and gay marriage, and asking him about that. Who am I to judge? He really struggled with Catholic teaching that we're told to love and to have compassion for others, but people who were gay were not treated with respect. People would turn their backs on them. That always bothered me. And, I knew so many people who really loved their faith, and they were in a same sex relation. That was a crisis for them because they knew that they were not accepted at their church. When he said that, I was such a breath of fresh air. They knew that we're gay. That was the one thing that hurt them the most, was that they loved their faith. They loved God. They loved the Blessed Mother. They knew that the church saw that their lifestyle was not okay. I had a friend tell me this, and he said, if I had the choice not be gay, I would not be gay because it would makes my life way harder than it has to be. This is something that it's always been with me, and how much pain he talked about and how painful that was for him, that he just wanted to be, this is who I am, and I had to learn to accept that and to find joy in just being authentically who I am. Just having that fresh, open dialogue, giving the permission for a priest to be able to bless people who are gay, to have the blessing of a priest. But as I was listening to some of the documentaries of Pope Francis, and he was talking about the blessings, but everybody says he was that priests are allowed to give the blessings for same sex couples or same sex marriages. And he clarified that in an interview. And he said, he goes, same sex people, or people who happen to be gay, they are deserving of a blessing. But the blessing of the marriage, that's something that he could not do because that's not part of our church teaching. But the individual person, they deserve the blessings of God. And that was a little bit confusing for people, but at the same time, it's a door that's opening a little bit. And I watched a documentary last night that they did on ABC, and there was a couple, a same-sex couple in Italy, and they had children, and they loved their faith. They loved being Catholics. And even though they knew the church did not accept their relationship, they wanted to raise their children Catholic, which I think is incredible. That despite all of that, they said, I wanted my kids to grow up and be raised Catholic like I was. And they were thinking about getting their kids into the Catholic school, and somehow somebody knew Pope Francis or got connected to this family that had this question, and they were afraid to even approach the school because they didn't think that they would accept them as a same-sex couple. Pope Francis heard about it and got on the phone, and they basically said, yeah, go ahead and call the school. You are welcome, and you will be welcomed with open arms. And that was the first time I ever heard that story. I have every right to be able to come and learn and to respect this family and to treat them with dignity. I was blown away by that. That was the first time I ever heard that story. Personal to me with friends who are very devout Catholics and people who are gay, people who are trans, and they're devout. They love God more than people that are sitting in the pews with us, I gotta tell you. And they have this struggle, this internal struggle that they have with their sexuality, and heartbreaking actually. Pope Francis, with his example of love and tenderness and kindness to people, opening our doors, opening our hearts to people who may not live the same lifestyle that we all do, but they want to learn about God and they want to love God. That he wants to open that door to people, also with immigrants and migrants, and speaking up until the day that he died. He spoke up on that, and his final address that he made to the world, he spoke about immigrants and migrants and how it's our duty to protect them and to welcome them into our communities. Seriously? Come on. It's a beautiful way, an example of showing, continuing the work that you do, and the work, and to show that people who are elderly are have so much value to bring people, especially with wisdom, but also to show that even though your physical body is slowing down, that they can still contribute so much richness to the world. A great example of having like a spiritual leader that is older, like the popes. He is so dedicated to the job that even though he had been in the hospital for many, many weeks, that he somehow was able to get released from the hospital, and he just did the best that he could the final days to be able to go out and see the crowds, even if it was just in his wheelchair, to go wave at the people, to do a little blessing from the balcony. The day that he died, he was out there on Easter blessing people and wishing them a happy Easter. And it was just amazing. His aide that was taking care of him, he had doubts that, is this the right thing that I should be doing? Do you think I still have enough in me to be able to go out here? And his aide said, yes, like, just go to your people. These are the people that you love. You can do this. Even the Pope having doubts. And there are things that he did that I didn't agree with. I talked about this on my YouTube video this week. I talk long about Pope Francis, but also there were some things that he did that I did not agree with, which I did not understand, which was removing traditional Latin Mass or limiting Latin Mass in throughout the world. Brought attention to that, and a lot of people did not understand that. It made sense, and Pope Francis, he had that science background. God created the earth, and the earth is our only home. We, as humans, have been entrusted with the care of the earth, the care of the animals, and it's our duty to manage that with respect. He understood that. A lot of people just did not understand, why is he talking about club shade? Should be talking about spiritual things. That was something that meant a lot to him because climate change again will impact everybody. So I thought that was really great. But just him being an example of just being humble and living a simple life. He didn't have the most or like dressed up vestments. He was very just plain dressed. He didn't live in Vatican apartments where the popes normally live. He lived with the rest of the clergies that lives in over in the Vatican. He lived with people. He paid his hotel bill after he was named pope. He went back and he said, "Oh no, I'm going to pay this," which is nuts. If it was me, I'd be like, "Oh no, this one's on us. This one's on us. If you can just pray for me, that would be fine." I just loved how when he first came out was introduced to the world and he humbly said, "Please pray for me." And I love that he was from South America. I love that he was different. He just had a different perspective. Thank you, Pope Francis, for everything that you did. A lot of people who have been affected by the church abuse scandal, they were not happy with him. I learned a little bit more about what happened in Chile. He actually went to bat for one of the bishops or priests there that was actually accused, and he didn't have the evidence. His advisors were not telling him the full story about the investigation. Once he got the information that he needed to make a decision, corrected, he did a complete about face and apologized for not doing the right thing and investigating and getting the facts before making a statement basically saying, "I back this guy. This guy's my friend." He took appropriate measures. However, there's still so much we have to do with protecting children within the church and removing priests quickly and deacons quickly, or anybody of the who works within our churches, if there's even a hint of abuse of power. We still have a lot to go. Whoever our pope is, I am having a very strong feeling that we may have a pope from the Philippines. I'm actually really excited about it because I think it would be amazing. I They are going to continue to open their arms to everyone and continue to protect immigrants and the migrants, protect them to feed the poor and protect the poor and continue to provide all the services that the Catholic Church has always had, but also to step up and to correct the wrongs that we have made. And our church has made a lot. I am not going to be the one to say, "Oh, our church is innocent." It's not. We have a lot of messed up history and we need to do better. Ridiculous and disgusting child abuse and sexual abuse. It's got to go. It's not cool. So we definitely need to do more on that and take action on that, and also remove anybody who's associated with that. Pope Francis had zero tolerance for any of that stuff. I think that needs to continue. We also need to continue to investigate and weed out people who have been connected to basically covering up a lot of things. I'm sure there's still people who are out there who have not been dealt with, who have been accused and are still being circulated and moved to different parishes to abuse others. If you want to watch a really good documentary about the child abuse scandal within the Catholic Church, there is a Netflix documentary called The Keepers, and it is shocking and disturbing. I think it's important for people to watch because it's not just the Catholic Church that has this issue. We are just more publicly known for having it, but every church has some form of a clergy person taking advantage of your position of power. So definitely check that out. And yeah, if you guys like this episode, please send me some comments. If you guys want to hear another really cool story about another spiritual connection that I made with someone who's tied to Pope Francis, that I happened to be one of my online friends that I met who was actually a seminarian who was studying to be a deacon. He participated in one of the Easter masses and how we got connected and the tragic story of how his life ended go to my YouTube channel and check that video out. I'm talking all about Pope Francis for this week and honoring him and really our hope for the next Pope. Catholic means universal, and that means everyone belongs. If you guys love this podcast, The Hot Tub Club, make sure to subscribe. And our next week will be amazing. Remember that you are worthy of all things in life, beauty, love, and joy, and peace. I look forward to seeing you in our next podcast.